Meditative traditions we're teaching here are inspired by practices that arose in India. And there was the general sense there that if we have just an ordinary mind, we tend to see things a little bit unclearly. And because of that unclarity, we get into habits that inevitably lead to painful experience. And meditation is here, ladies. Hello. We may need a traffic cop or a chair set up. So there was a general understanding that the way we, in our untutored mode of existence, we don't see things exactly clearly. And because we don't see things exactly clearly, we tend to have a lot of reaction patterns to things. So for example, one of the biggest things we don't seem to fully appreciate is, for example, impermanence. Things are always changing. Our bodies, our minds, our experience, everything is always changing. But in some kind of deep way, we kind of cling to permanence. If somebody dies, it's like shocking. And in part, it's shocking because we haven't really absorbed the reality of impermanence. So, practitioners of meditation developed ways of really delving into their own personal experience ever more clearly, ever more deeply, so that their perception was more in harmony with reality, and that there was both an enrichment of experience possible and also a greater harmony with reality, a greater harmony with the way things actually are. Fast forward from, let's say, 500 BC to about 1990, period of about 2,000 years. Hello, good morning. And there's a large amount of interest in the West in meditation, and neuroscientists started studying it. And they started discovering that there were some true benefits to the practice of meditation. And so I was just reading recently online about one of the benefits of meditation and paying attention. And that is that if we pay attention carefully, there tends to be more positive experiences in our life. Our experience of life tends to be a bit more positive. So I thought I would talk a little bit about that, and also just describe the frame of meditation a little bit more carefully, because when we actually do it in a few minutes, we'll just sort of just teach it very, very briefly. I think all of us in this modern era are familiar with a sense of rush and a sense of pressure and a sense of maybe doing 2 or 3 or 4 things almost simultaneously. And we all kind of know that we're not living fully. Most of us have some kind of gnawing desire for something more fulfilling. something richer. Now, it seems that most of us, in our kind of natural state, when we think about getting something richer and fuller, seem to incline to more. We want more objects. We want more experience. Like Times Square in Manhattan is kind of the pinnacle of possibility, or Las Vegas, where you've got lights and you've got cars and you've got shows, and maybe there's a tiger walking down the street, and there's a possibility of gambling, and there are attractive men and attractive women, and there's winning, and there's Cirque du Soleil, and there's just so much, and there is a certain kind of enrichment and a certain kind of an excitement. But most of us also recognize that even after, a few hours in Las Vegas, it's like too much. And in a kind of counterintuitive way, what people found in Asia, and especially the spiritual seekers and religious practitioners, was that there was a way of moving away from this constant external orientation and needing to fill oneself up with things and objects, and that if we can slow ourselves down, that there can be a movement from the external to the internal, a settling into the internal, and also a greater resiliency with dealing with the realities of ordinary existence, such as, let's say, impermanence. And so, one of the things that I think is important in approaching meditation and understanding it and practicing it is that the frame and the how, the adverb of meditation, the how we meditate, is actually as important as anything else in the process of meditation. Because the how allows us to actually start experiencing life a little bit differently. So while there are objects of meditation, we can often talk about a subject and an object, and at least to begin with, there's some benefit to thinking about that. We're a subject, and we have some kind of thing that we are going to meditate on. And the way we practice here, we're going to meditate on the breath. And we're going to try to just unite our attention with the process of breathing. But in that process, I use an acronym, and an acronym is where you put a couple of first letters of a number of words together so that you can remember it more easily. So the acronym I'm going to share with you is just this morning, we'll go with FACTS. FACTS. F-A-C-T-S. So the first F in FACTS stands for freshness. And this speaks to really allowing your mind to move into the present. And one of the things that meditation allows us to arrive at is a lot newer sense of experience. Now, many of you in this audience today are fairly young, so you don't have the problem of a lot of tread wear on your tires. But as you start getting older, and let's say you get into a relationship or you have a friend, and let's say the friend's name is Jane, and you see Jane today, and it's like, oh, Jane, and tomorrow you see Jane, and same Jane, and 3 days later, same Jane, 4 days later, same Jane, 15 years later, same Jane. And if you don't really pay any attention to it, you have almost a kind of pre-inclination to imagine that people just stay the same. Maybe you have some prejudice and, oh, that person's from New York, New Yorkers, da-da-da, and you've got it, New Yorkers, they're all the same. Maybe somebody's come from Uzbekistan and you happen to have a real poke to pick with Uzbekis. They're an Uzbeki. I know those Uzbekis. They always cheat you when you're buying a sheep. People have these ideas about everything. Many, many people, probably the majority of our population, live in very, very constipated concepts of reality. I'm an Astros fan. I'm an Aggie. I'm a Longhorn. Now you know everything you need to know about me because I'm a Longhorn. Life is extraordinarily rich, and it's way richer than Aggie, Longhorn, New Yorkers, Uzbekis. We are all amazing creatures, amazingly rich in the momentary experience of our lives and in the momentary experience of the other. Our ordinary mind has to use shorthand. If you were to walk into Kroger's or Randall's or H-E-B and have a kind of really intense, a new loaf of bread and a new color on the wrapping, and I wonder how the bread smells, and you were really to take in the experience, you'd never be able to do your shopping. And so our mind actually creates short circuits and shortcuts to facilitate us moving through life. But the price of that is that we have very, very stereotypical senses of ourselves and stereotypical senses of others. I can't possibly get up in front of an audience and speak. Might be a hard and fast concrete tale that you tell about yourself. I always do well in math exams. What happens if you fail one? What we're doing in meditation is starting to bring attention to our actual experience. Most of us live in our heads, and we don't even know we're living there. And occasionally, when there's a shock, we might have some freshness of experience. Hurricane Harvey hits Houston, and people had new experiences. And if you can remember back to what it was like to live through Hurricane Harvey, you'll probably remember that it was probably very unsettling, but there was also something new and unpredictable about it. People were doing unpredictable things. Nature was doing unpredictable things. you were seeing unpredictable things, even if just going through the neighborhoods and seeing piles and piles of furniture on the streets was shocking. And some people lost their homes. Shocking. Have to say goodbye to your whole life. Or your friends lost their homes. But there was something alive and different. And we don't typically pay too much attention to the aliveness of our experience. And the more we can be alive in our experience and experience the aliveness of our experience, the more we can flow with things and the richer and more fulfilling our lives can be. So the first thing that I recommend when we do something like just pay attention, put your mind on your breath, and then you will settle in your breath, is just have a fresh attitude. It's like, what does breath feel like? And maybe you'll realize that maybe you never even paid attention to what it's like to breathe. And where is the breath? Can I even experience the breath in my body? And what is it to settle into the process of breathing? And what does that feel like? The next piece of facts is acceptance. So many of us are at war with ourselves and unaccepting of who we are. Not liking ourselves is a kind of common cold of ordinary experience. I'm not very good at this, I'm not very good at that. I'm not really attractive, I'm overweight, I'm underweight, I'm too big here, I'm too small there. I've got these muscles that do work, these muscles that don't work. I'm great at school, I'm terrible at school. Can we just accept our experience without judgment? Can we notice if we can settle into our breathing? And if we can't settle into our breathing, can we accept that? Acceptance is a hugely positive piece of meditative practice, and it's usually a positive piece of being able to negotiate the world. So many of us and so many of our friends and relatives are at war with ourselves. Moving on. C, in fact, curiosity. Well, the fact that you're here means you're curious, which is great. Or maybe you're here because of school. But if you're in school, I hope you're enjoying it through curiosity. And curiosity is an amazingly liberating aspect of life. It's a freshness of mind, and we bring it to meditation. Every moment of life is different, and certainly science tells us that, and we all understand that in theory. But can we experience that every moment of our life is actually different, and there's something new and different, and can we be curious about that in ourselves? And can we be curious about in the people we know? Are our parents curious about us? Often that's kind of lost in the modern day experience. Parents are often their own iPads, iPhones, jobs, multiple jobs, emotional quandaries. Can our friends at least be curious in us, or are we curious about our friends? Curiosity from friends, parents, relatives is a wonderful gift to experience. Can we be curious about ourselves? What is actually going on with me? And if I'm curious, can I accept what's going on with me? I'm unhappy. I'm happy. I'm feeling this pain. What's the nature of this pain? Is it permanent or impermanent? Everything in our life is impermanent. Can we actually start noticing how things change? curiosity. Facts, we go to T, which is tenderness. So, when we're practicing meditation, we want to be tender with ourselves. We want to have an attitude of tenderness to our experience. We live in a very hustle-bustle kind of universe. We're all bumping up against each other. We're all pressing. We're all pressurized. Can we use an opportunity for meditation to be tender with our own experience? So when I'll instruct us to place our attention on the breath and just settle into the breath, can we be tender in doing that? And can we just have a tender experience with ourselves? And if we put on an S for facts, can we be sensitive? Can we be sensitive to our experience? Meditation is an allowing to be with our experience in an ongoing, fresh, accepting, curious, tender, and sensitive manner. Now, interestingly enough, if you think about it and just in the abstract, and somebody says, well, what are you going to do when you meditate? And the person says, well, we're going to have you place your attention on your mind, and we're going to have you rest in the process of breathing. Generally, over the long course of practice, it is the case, if we're able to put our attention on our breath and settle into it, slowly, slowly, our minds might, all right, so here's the actual picture. Initially, when we first start meditating, it actually might seem that our minds are noisier than we thought they were. We might actually think we're having more thoughts. And that's because we're just sort of training our attention on our inner experience. So we might actually feel like, wow, my mind is even noisier than I thought. And with ongoing, gentle, regular practice, there can be a slowing down of peripheral thoughts and experiences, and just a settling into our experience. So one of the things that can happen with attentional practice is that the rush of thoughts in our experience can become less. There's another interesting piece to developing attention, and that is when we place our attention on something and maintain it there. And this is according to the ancient Indian psychologists. You'll have to see if this works for you. We are able to just place and maintain our attention. There's a kind of pleasurable interest that can arise in the mind. Something as simple and seemingly boring as the breath can start becoming amazingly interesting. It's just fascinating, the breath itself. And so I started by saying that researchers are currently finding that the practice of meditation is leading to more positive experiences in life. And I think if we can slow down, if we can bring some freshness, acceptance, curiosity, tenderness, sensitivity, facts to the practice of meditation, and we do learn to see what it's like to place our attention on something and hold it there, and we see the kind of pleasure that arises from simplicity rather than from multiplying our experiences and enhancing our stimuli, but actually kind of cutting back our stimuli and focusing the mind, a different kind of pleasure emerges. then that kind of positivity can also carry forward into life in general.